Okay, we are live. Hi,
Okay.
Michael. Thanks for joining.
Very happy
Thank
to
you
be
for coming
here.
along. I know we were just laughing about the fact that I've got lots of questions prepared, but we have had a few questions come in as well. So it's not going to be just me. But I will say I really enjoyed re-listening to your podcast this morning. And just some of the things we talked about. And I think it's still probably one of my favorite ones, just the whole, by the way, I used to be an ex-professional ballet dancer. And I'm sitting there like, how many times have we been out? And why do I know this about you? So I wanted to go back to there and start from there and just talk through how that happened and then your change in job role, because people talk about changing job roles, but I feel like they talk about going from marketing to product. They don't talk about being a professional dancer and then working in HR. So I'd love to hear more about that, and then I will jump to everybody else's questions.
Okay. So that transition for me was kind of brought about by a couple of things. First and foremost, my family. When you're a dancer, you work wherever the work is. So that's different cities, different countries. It's on, it's off. There's not necessarily, unless you're in one of the major companies, and even then they're touring all the time. So there's not the kind of stability that sometimes you need. And you can do that when you're a small family. So with one child, you can sort of get away with it. But I suddenly had two children. I don't quite know how that happened, but like one minute there was one, then there was two. It's like, what is this? And so you then reach a point in your life where you sort of, you have to put on your parent sort of hat and say, okay, what do I need to do for my family? What's the right thing? How to start building a new life so that we've got some stability and some consistency, and things like being at home. I didn't see my eldest daughter walk for 3 months because I was on the road. And this is Zoom days where everything could be done in real time. People literally had to take out a camera, take a photograph of it, print the photo off and mail it to you if you wanted to see anything. It's ancient history for some of you young folks out there. Pardon me. So coming out of that, it's surprising really that when you finished in ballet, you don't necessarily have a lot of corporate skills. And it's not the kind of thing that when you walk into an interview, you can say to somebody, oh, this is what I was doing. And so here's how that translates to where you're at. And obviously, as I hadn't been in business, I didn't have the skills to even articulate that if I had wanted to, or if I'd known how to do that. So moving into recruitment almost was by accident. Somebody that I knew had been hired through a recruitment agency, and that agency was advertising for people. And not knowing anything about it, I went in, I did some interviews, I did quite well. However, they wanted somebody who had a degree, which, there's not a lot of degrees in ballet. But having had a couple of conversations in that space, it seemed interesting. It seemed kind of a job about people, a job about conversations, and a job about storytelling. And there's one thing that you are if you're in theatre or entertainment is a storyteller, as those who will know me can attest to. Yeah. And from there, I just kept trying. And it was at peak time, right? This is the peak IT boom, when if you could spell IT, you were worth 50,000. If you could write it in a sentence, you were an IT program director, right? And I got into IT never having used a computer before. So, of course, how appropriate. And got fortunate in that I landed a wonderful manager who had this really strange belief that if you train people and give them coaching and development, they might actually get better at their job. And it was good luck more than anything else, but sometimes you need that stroke of luck to take you in a direction that you never knew was possible. And the rest, as they say, is 21 years of history. We won't say how many odd years, but just, like a number of years of history. Yeah.
It does. But what an incredible first boss to land. Like, it must have been a huge leap of faith in the first place to think that it was going to work out, but obviously, all the different emotions that come with that. So to be able to have a boss like that genuinely believed in you and knew that he invested in you, it would come good for everybody is pretty incredible.
Look, it really is. And it's a lesson that, over time you do learn that the people in your lives who are prepared to invest in you and help you and mentor you and coach you are relationships that you really should value and take advantage of. People are generous often. And I know in the talent community particularly, and I realize I've leapt forward in time here, but like if I think of the talent community that I operate in now, there is an incredible generosity of spirit and kindness amongst this community. And I've recently stepped into a big new role where I'm doing things that are well outside my comfort zone, and I'm plaintively putting my hand up and asking people for help. And I've got waves and waves and waves of people coming forward saying, oh, try this, or, here's what I did, or, don't do that because I made that mistake. And it's extraordinary to be in that situation and see that. So, very early on, I got lucky, but I've really, it's something that I'm grateful for still to this day. Wendy was my mentor for years. She became a dear, dear, dear friend of mine. And I never looked back as a result.
I love that. It was actually, again, one of the things you brought up in the first podcast, and leads me to my second question, at which point I promised to ask everybody else this question. The one thing, and again, it's something else we touched on, is the fact that, your crazy startup world, you've taken on, your last role was huge. This is even bigger. And you do so much. You're always learning, you're always studying. Even I think there was a joke around the fact that, like, oh, well, that's what the hours of 12 midnight to 3 a.m. are for. And I know that's only half a joke, and that's the worst bit, is like that is legitimately true. So I guess it's probably two parts. How do you manage the whole proactive piece, because you've gone in with a plan, versus the reactive? Because we all know as soon as we walk in the door on a Monday or a Tuesday or whatever day, there's a bunch of new priorities. So there's that. But then there's also, like, I want to know how you switch off, because you can't, the greatest thing in the world, you can't run at hard as things as you always do. There has to be some downtime somewhere. So where does that balance come in? So two questions, I guess.
Two questions. Okay. So to the first point, there's a temptation to try and do everything and to want to do everything, because when you're in a startup, you literally have everything to do. You're coming into a white sheet of paper, and it's kind of like, good, build it, just make it all happen. Build all the things, the people, the processes. The key for me in that, and this will be something dear to your heart, is I've been working with a coach for the last almost 18 months who has taught me many, many valuable lessons. And the most important one that we've been underlining recently is you don't have to do it all yourself. And if you try and do it all yourself, you will burn out. And there's just no way. When I look at my to-do list, if I tried to do everything that I needed to do in the first 30 days, I wouldn't sleep. There wouldn't be downtime, and there would still not be enough things done, because that's just the way it goes. So, don't do it all yourself. And the second thing that she's really taught me is pick the big things that have to be done and do those. Because if you look at your to-do list, we all do this, and all the science tells you, right, your ABCs or whatever modeling you want to do, if you only did the most important things, you'd be successful, because there's a reason they're the most important things. And they have the most impact, and they deliver the most lasting resonance that you can use as a plank to go forward with over time. So focus on those big things, do the big things, and be really ruthless about identifying things down the line that are just not worth your time. And it's not that they're not important, they're not as important. So clearly rank that order and draw a line under it. I was at a meeting with my CEO and CFO yesterday, and that was one of the things that we really identified. In the list of things to do, there are some things that if I get to them in the first quarter, that's great. But if I don't, it's not going to matter if I hit the top two, and they're the ones that are going to have the most impact. So how do I take downtime? You make yourself do it. You just have to prioritize yourself, which is the second lesson outside of work that my coach really taught me. If you don't make time for yourself, no one else will, because there's always a demand on your time. There's always another email, there's another presentation, there's another proposal, there's another document that you could be working on. But should you be doing it? If you really should be making sure that for yourself, you have that time. Now, that could be anything, right? That could be going to the gym, that could be playing a sport, that could be cooking, it could be reading, it could be watching trashy television, if that's what you do to unwind your brain. But make sure that you do that, because if you don't, and I've made this mistake before, I had a job where I was getting to the office every day less than 6 hours after I'd gone home. And I did that for 3 years. And it was a spiral into ultimately a terrible productivity because I was exhausted. But I felt that if I did more, so the answer to problems often is just go harder, do more, like really have a go this time. You only did a 16-hour day yesterday. Come on, get in and do a 17-hour today and you'll do more. And ultimately, you're nowhere near as productive. And I think if COVID has taught us one thing, and it's taught us a few things, but the real necessity for your own mental health, your own time to let your brain process things in a world that's been full of chaos and change and really uncertain times. Certainly for me, at any rate, I can say that I've learned incredibly deeply that time for myself is important. And I do a lot of different things. Yes, I play a sport. I go to the gym. I read a lot. I listen. I'm often multitasking. I'll be cooking in the kitchen and I will also then be listening to a podcast at the same time, because, you've still got to do as much as you can to make it all work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like making that time for yourself and making yourself a priority, because if you don't do it, no one else will.
They are two wonderful bits of advice from your coach.
Yes.
Okay.
She's pretty good.
Question. Actually, question from Joe on that. What does success mean for you?
Oh, it means different things in different circumstances, I guess. But one of my abiding principles in life is try and make people feel better, just in general. I don't know, that's a really big motherhood statement. Oh, make people feel better. Yay. But if you can do something that makes somebody's life in a day just a little bit better than it was, then you've left an imprint. And I know for myself, there are times, when someone just does something that out of the blue, nice for you, you just feel better. You have a bit of a bounce in your step, a bit of a smile that you didn't have before. But on a more granular level, I think success is about choosing goals that you want to go after and having a go at them. And sometimes, again, like motherhood statements, it's about the journey, not the destination. Often it is about the destination, let's face it, right? Like you can't sit down with your CEO at the end of the month and go, well, I had a crack, but nothing really happened, right? So you do want to get to the destination, but enjoy the journey while you're there, and take a look at the things that you've achieved in a really open mindset. So it's easy to get really critical on ourselves, right? Because we judge ourselves as harshly as anybody. We expect more always, right? And it's one of the things, and you've started your own business, so I'm sure you know this, right? You sit down and you go, I'm going to do all these things, and you don't get to all the things, and you think to yourself, oh, well, that was a fail. But it's never a fail, because you did some of the things. And this is where the being ruthless and drawing a line on the things. If you make it clear what you want to achieve and make it clear what you're doing to get there, then success is making progress some days. And some days success is being able to turn the page on something and go, good, that was completed. And that was important. And so I'm off, and it's wonderful.
I love that. That's a really beautiful definition of success. And one we probably need to remind ourselves of now and again.
Yes.
Okay, Neil has sent in a question. Who have been the most important influences on your career success to date, professional and personal, and why?
I guess along the way, there's been a lot. I mentioned Wendy, who was my first manager. To this day, I still use things that Wendy taught me. I still ask myself questions that she asked me on a daily basis. I worked for Wendy in 4 different organizations. So obviously we bonded really well together. And she was a dear, dear friend of mine. My kids called her Auntie Wendy for years because she was just that person. And, when you lose somebody like that in your life, it does have a lasting impact. We lost Wendy to cancer a few years back after a long, long battle. And, you don't need to lose someone to realize how important they are. But when you do lose someone, it absolutely reinforces them. And so, I like to honor her memory by remembering those lessons and by using the things that she taught me. And because she had, as you said at the start, right, the ultimate belief in me. She took a chance on a complete random who'd walked in the door with no experience, no background. She saw something and she went, yeah, I'll give you a go. And she gave me time. And I failed so many times in that first 6 months. It's just, I look back now and I cringe. And I shouldn't, because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no experience. I had no background. So, of course, I was going to fail. in a lot of agencies that back then, particularly if you started in 6 months, you weren't doing well, you were out the door. So to be given that time and given the safety of saying, all right, I'm going to have a go at this, and having someone come to you and ask you for the 7th time that month, now let's review how that went, and what do you think we could do differently? And you go, oh, okay, I'll get it eventually. And eventually I did. So she was a wonderful, wonderful mentor to me. In fact, I wrote an article for Hung Lee in the Recruiting Tribune, which talks a bit about this. You can go back and find that, and you'll get more information on this now that I think about it. Shameless self-promotion. So there were some others. There was a guy I worked for by the name of Darren Morris, who was the general manager at Elan, and he'd been one of the founders of Robert Walters. He'd worked in the UK. He worked in Australia. He was what he taught me was the value of business in recruitment and how to build a business around it, right? Cost structures, models, things that I hadn't really considered. You know, I'd come from that world of, I've got a job, find some candidates, fill the job, right? You start out and then you build a broader set of experience. And he gave me an opportunity to do a lot of writing and tender responses, which you really have to get very good at understanding the mechanisms of business. I worked with some wonderful people in my time. I spent 10 years at Salesforce, which is kind of like startup university, as a TA person. And I worked with some phenomenal people there who I still talk to, you know, Luann Sequeira, Rich, who's in the US killing it. And then, most recently, making the decision to get a coach. I hadn't done that. I hadn't really strategically planned my career. I hadn't kind of thought about how do you get to the next step. I kind of, you know, I'd done really well. I'd worked really hard. I delivered some success. And so that gets you opportunities for things. But over the last kind of 18 months, I've really thought about that, and we broke down my goals and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And ultimately that landed me, you know, this new role. And, you know, for whatever reason, I decided I wanted to build a business completely as like the head of people and culture, to own the whole thing. And, you know, you've got to lift your eyes above the horizon sometimes. And my coach really helped me do that. And I still, you know, I talk to her all the time about the things that I'm doing and have questions. And, you know, and it's been invaluable to me to have somebody else who can look at what I'm doing and really be critical. And critical in a different way, like not critical as in, oh, you messed up, but critical as in, okay, why are you doing that? What's the benefit from that? How could you do that? Where's the structure? And apply those things every day. So it's been phenomenal to go down that path and to get somebody whose job is really to do that. And it's made an enormous impact on my life for sure.
That's awesome. I want to touch on coaches versus mentors in a minute, but there is one more question. And I think we've touched on different points, but I think this one might just bring it together a little bit. So Pavi, right, how did you manage your career pivot so effortlessly? Did you have any mentors or coaches that helped push you into these roles? Or was it a more organic learn and do type approach?
So first of all, I'd slightly push back on the effortlessly. It may have looked like that.
I thought you might.
But definitely, you know, it's the duck swimming approach, right? Above the water, you may look serene and in control, and underneath you go, So I think two things about that, right? So sometimes you make a pivot because an opportunity presents itself and you think, okay, let's have a go at that. And I suppose in my life, that's been one of the things that I've done a lot of, is let's have a go. You know, you don't launch into a career as a dancer unless you've got an incredible sense of self-belief, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of other people, many of them, in fact, a lot of them, much more talented than you. So you must have that incredible self-belief to say, no, I can do this. People are going to want to, you know, see what I have to do. And I think I've carried that through in my career as well. I would like to think I'm intellectually curious. I'm, as some of my friends call me, I am a nerd. I like to really nerd out on things. I will read up on stuff. I love to learn about new things. And that, in doing that, I think it opens up ideas and thoughts that maybe I hadn't had before, which has probably led to some of those pivots. And I always say, look, I didn't really choose these things. And I know that's, you know, not exactly true, because of course you make those choices. You know, you don't just sort of wake up one day in a new job. You have to actually go through a process and evaluate the role and see if it's the right one for you. So I think the other thing that for me has held me in good stead is I haven't been afraid to get something wrong and to completely fall on my face. And I think that's really important. If you want to be right all the time, do a really safe job that's predictable, that doesn't have any other influences coming into it. That's not for me. I am, yes, a larger than life, colourful figure. Anyone who knows me can attest, as the shirt probably will attest. So I like to try new things and I like to experience new things. And I'm often asking myself, like, yeah, I wonder what it would be like if, what it would feel like to do that. You know, how would it be if I gave that? And it's certainly in the last couple of years, I've been much more strategic about it. Yes. So before I was probably more of the bright, shiny things, you know, opportunist, like something came up and it looked interesting. So I would go and say, okay, yeah, that looks interesting. But particularly for this last role, I was very, very particular about what I wanted to do and the direction that I wanted to go in and the goals that I wanted to achieve. And so one of the things that if you look at some of the theory of goal setting is like you set the goal first, like what is it that you want to do? And then you build the steps backwards from there so that you can have the, okay, well, this is step one. Have I done step one? No, if I haven't done that, I'm not going to get to the conclusion. So doing that reverse engineering of how to get to that goal was, I think, this time around the key to me actually achieving that.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Thank you. Okay, now we've touched on mentors and coaches, and this is what I wanted to know.
Yep.
How would you sum up the difference between the two, and how have you used both differently, I guess, throughout your career?
Yeah, so I think that for me, the dividing line between them is a mentor is somebody that you can turn to for advice and who will say, okay, yeah, look, I would maybe look at it this way. I would consider this. I would think about that. And you can have lots of different mentors, you know, people who like, for example, in my football team, right? When I started football, I had no idea. And a bunch of the senior players who knew a lot about it, I would ask them questions and they would give me advice. And it was more in the nature of, look, give that a try, do that, see how that works. And there's a little, with a mentor, I think it's more personal accountability. You know, if your mentor says to you, hey, give this a go, it's up to you as to whether or not you really want to do that. The difference for me with a coach is when you sit down with a coach, you're laying it all out on the line. You're putting everything out there. They're asking you all of the questions. They call you on your bullshit and they're like, really? Let's rewind that and try again. Now let's really, really get into this. And with a coach, you've got to be prepared to be really authentic and really exposed and admit sometimes that long-held beliefs that you've got, whether they're limiting or just, you know, beliefs about how something should be done, not only can be challenged, but should be challenged. And it doesn't mean you change, right? Sometimes it's about just challenging that so that you justify it. But sometimes it's about being honest enough with yourself to say, okay, yeah, I need to look at that very differently. I need to change what I'm doing to get a different result. And again, there's all those old aphorisms, right? If you keep doing the same thing day after day and expecting a different result, then, you know, there's something not quite right with the way that you're looking at things. And a coach can really help you do that. Because I think when you're in the middle of things, I mean, as we know it, right, you can't see the wood for the trees. You can't lift your eyes above the horizon. You can't even see the horizon because you're looking down at the task that's right in front of you at that time. So I think taking on a coach and really taking that step and understanding that difference for me was a pivotal shift. And it's the kind of like the next level up in terms of, entrusting yourself into somebody and saying, you know, like, tell me, help me, give me ideas. And they don't tell you what to do. This is the great thing about coaches. They ask you a whole bunch of questions and they get you to workshop these things. And then they put forward scenarios for you and you have to make that choice. But you've got somebody else there then who really is holding you accountable because you commit to them that you will do this. And then they ask you to show, where did you do it? You know, since the last time we spoke, have you actually done the things that you said you were going to do? And it's confronting because sometimes they ask you questions and you do. I know there's a couple of really long held beliefs that no, I'm not changing. And it took a while, but, you know, we chipped away at it. And, you know, when you release yourself from that and you put your trust in somebody else, it's a really amazingly free feeling to have, to say, yes, I'm going to look at this through someone else's eyes and take on their advice and make impactful change to my life. Yeah.
That's awesome. That might be the best summary of a coach versus mentor I think I've ever heard. That's so good. It is 25 minutes, so we are out of time. Thank you so much for today. Honestly, I couldn't love your podcast anymore. This was fantastic. Just your energy, enthusiasm, the storytelling, just brilliant. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Look, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me back. I've loved seeing the journey that you and Striving have been on, and it's been wonderful to hear all the podcasts and see the launch of the platform. And yes, I'm a signed up member, so I'm really excited. So I can't wait to see how it's all going to play out for you. So yeah, look, anytime, happy to talk and share stories, you know that, and good luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye for now.